program. And we said, absolutely. And then the pandemic hit. We were going to do it in April, so that did not work. And so then a couple of months ago, she said, how about doing it virtually and going ahead and trying something? So we agreed, but we just asked for your patience a little bit because you're our first program, and we're all kind of new to Zoom. So we just ask that you be patient with us as we try this. We are a very committed group and we believe in what we're doing, but this is new for us, but we're so glad you're here. We have more people than we expected. So that's a good problem to have. So I wanted to share with you just a little bit of background about our group and why we feel like it's important to engage in sacred conversations. And then Sharon is going to talk a little bit about some things that we need to remember as United Methodist. So as I said, my name is Pat Bellingrath. I'm a member of the Conversations on Race group, a group that we formed about 4 years ago around a kitchen table. The 9 of us, black and white, clergy and laity, began meeting once a month because we wanted to do something to address the inequities and the injustices of racism. We talked, we listened, we became aware, we cried, and we learned. We taught, and we changed. And then we decided to put our words into action, our faith into action. We now have a much larger group of allies, and we are actively seeking to help transform ourselves and our church, and to do whatever we can to help start these difficult conversations in churches, in small groups, or wherever they're needed. But the most important thing about our group is the fact that we are still talking, and we are still listening, and we are still learning. And these conversations with people that we have gotten to know so well and we love so dearly are still difficult and challenging. Tonight marks the first district program our group has hosted, and we are excited and nervous. We ask that you be somewhat patient with us as we are new to these programs and new to Zoom. But we are hopeful and we are committed. We believe in these sacred conversations and what they can mean to us and to those who participate. And what does it require of us to be in these sacred conversations? It requires us to be brave and vulnerable. We can choose courage over comfort. Courage in having difficult conversations is not the absence of fear, but it is having a reason for doing the right thing in spite of the fear. Think of it this way. Fear or uncertainty can be a validation of love. We can be both brave and vulnerable. Yes, these two go together. We will make mistakes and we will learn about blind spots that we didn't realize we even had. But we must talk to one another. We can start by engaging with one another in uncomfortable conversations. Respectful dialogue is fine, it's needed. Honest give and take encounters are good. As retired Bishop Will Willimon says, though, our Jesus expects nothing less than embrace. Not a one-sided embrace, but open arms. In opening, there is a desire for a changed relation to one another. Think about it. Your arms are open, you are waiting. Your arms close and open again. In opening, our arms are not smothering, but allow the other to stay as they are. But now we are in a relationship, and every time we move from exclusion to embrace, it's an earthly experience of what one day we shall do forever. Our stories are interwoven, our lives intertwined. They have been since the beginning. Let's do the hard work together, side by side, sisters and brothers in Christ. Let's engage in sacred conversation. Let's listen. Let's learn. Let's be a witness and an example here in Holston. As Austin Channing Brown, author of I'm Still Here, Finding Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness, says, let's be the people of Christ who share a love that is troubled by injustice. Not a love that is aloof, not a love that refuses hard work, nor a love that refuses to see systems and structures of injustice. So let's enter into this time with open hearts, a willingness to listen, and a spirit of hope. Sharon?
All right, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Then I'm really glad to be here, and my task is a real simple one. It's to just kind of talk about some of the things that the United Methodist Church, our stance on racism, racial justice, our charter for racial justice, and our baptismal vows. And so I just want to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about those in the event that you may or may not be familiar. Um, the United Methodist Women have been, for a long time, I think since their inception, they have been fighting racial injustice. So it's a part of who they are. And I think someone said something to somebody one time about they were going to be working on, we are now in a process of dismantling racism. And they said it to someone in the United Methodist Church, and they said, we've been doing that for decades. The United Methodist Women. So we want to come along beside the United Methodist Women, and we want to see racial justice as a biblical issue. We want to see it as a leadership issue. We want to see it as a community issue. We want to see it as a public policy issue. So there is a charter for us to seek out, to look for racism, to be anti-racist. And when we find it, our task is at any cost to dismantle it. There's so much information at the general conference level for the United Methodist Church. There are resources, books, and all kinds of things that you can read about. The United Methodist Women has an entire 120-page tool and resources for racial justice. So you could go and you could look that up. But what we are about is we're about changing behavior. We're about changing society. We're about taking risk. And so tonight, we will have an opportunity to take a risk. We'll have an opportunity to look and to see who we are and what we are supposed to do. I don't know if you know about GCOR or not, but it's the General Commission on Race and Religion. It's a whole general agency that's available to us. And so we are constantly trying to find ways to enter into right relationships with one another. And so we have opportunities to do anti-racism workshops. We can look at implicit bias, some of those costs. There's a $10 book that's available to you. And then from our baptismal vow, I don't know if you all remember, a lot of us were young when we were baptized and we probably don't remember. And maybe we heard it in a confirmation class, maybe we didn't, but we know that for our role, let me just read it to you. I have it on my phone. I moved my phone. Hold on a minute. I had it on my phone and I wanted to share it with you in case, I'm just looking for it right here so that I can read it appropriately. If I can't find it real quick, we'll go ahead and just talk about it. Our job is to resist evil. Our job is to recognize racism. We're supposed to look at injustices, all of those kinds of things. When we are baptized into the United Methodist Church, into the body of Christ, we say that we will do those things. Few of us actually do that. And so what we want to do with Conversations on Race, we want to talk to you about opportunities for you now to get involved in doing the very thing that you said that you would do upon your baptism. So tonight, as we move further into this, we will be talking about the process of renouncing, rejecting, and resisting racism. So come along with us on this fantastic voyage. And about an hour from now, you'll be saying, whew, you'll be glad you did. Pat?
Thank you, Sharon. Stephanie Blue is going to read something in a minute that we think is pretty powerful about sacred conversations. But we're going to ask everybody to take a minute or two and to write one or two words, everybody write one or two words in the chat that describes how you feel when talking about race or racism. Just one or two words that come immediately to your mind when you hear the words race or racism, or when you hear somebody discussing it, or when you're discussing it, just one or two words in the chat. And then we'll talk about these, we'll save them and talk about them next week.
Why call it sacred conversations? Because we recognize that racism is not only a perversive system, pervasive system that perpetrates economic and political inequality. Racism is a wound at the heart of our nation that has profound spiritual ramifications. To understand the call to conversations as sacred work means that we refuse to settle for the way things are or to despair in the face of ongoing injustice. Because we are, each one of us, called to be disciples of Jesus Christ, we cannot resist or ignore the sacred work of racial reconciliation. Relying on God to embolden and strengthen us, we commit to embrace the difficult task
We may have lost Stephanie's internet connection.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I didn't know if it was just me or not.
I can pick up from the agenda. What was her last minute? What was her last words?
Why don't you
Relying
start?
on God to embolden and
yeah.
strengthen us, we commit to embrace the difficult task of recognizing, naming, and confronting the many ways in which we experience racism, personal, interpersonal, institutional, and cultural. We have the ability and the responsibility to seek and enact change. Sacred conversations are never easy, especially when they call for us to confront our history, herstory, and to speak to the injustices of the present. We will honor the value of diverse life experiences, and we will commit to being open to hear one another's viewpoints. And most of all, we recognize that our deepest common humanity is not grounded in race, religious, creed, or national origin, but in the extravagantly inclusive love of God. We also recognize we cannot do this work alone. We need you, friends, colleagues, and allies who can support, challenge, and hold one another accountable. Reverend Leah.
Good evening, everyone. It is good to see you. And I have been asked to lead us in a centering prayer as we begin this work. But first, let me just comment that I think this gathering of us tonight, some of us are friends, some of us are close friends, and others of us are strangers or not too well known to each other. But I think after the process we go through tonight and the other nights that to come, that I think it's going to draw us closer. I think that as I look through this gathering, as I was paging through, it's just a lovely reminder to me of our journey. And it reminds me that the journey towards justice that we are about is something that can bring us together. And so that inspires me. As I said, I'm asked to do a centering prayer. And as I thought about what that could be tonight, I'll just share with you today. This morning, I was in a several-hour meeting talking about the increased violence in the Black community in Knoxville for all the reasons that were going on and what churches could do. This afternoon, I spent several hours at my church for our food ministry. We do grocery giveaway every other Tuesday. So the pandemic of violence, there's the pandemic of food insecurity. There is also the pandemic. And so I find that I know I am very much in need of centering. So I'm glad to be able to do that. When I think about how to lead in a centering experience, the place that I go to always is the Lake Junaluska Labyrinth. And I don't know if any of you have ever walked the labyrinth at Lake Junaluska, but I love it. It is a dear and wonderful place. And it is one of my places that I go for centering. So I wrote some comments down to help us as we prepare to pray the centering prayer that I put together. When I think about navigating through that labyrinth, and if you can just envision with me as I describe it, it's a familiar path. If you've been through it before, for me it is, because I always go through it. It's a universal path. And it's a path that I like to take very slowly as I move towards the center of it, going round and round. It's a place where I can lose myself by tuning in and tuning out at the same time, tuning in the world, tuning out the world. I get a sense as I walk through it of the countless others that have walked it, the countless others that will walk it after me. So I get a sense of all of those others. I also feel a sense of the solitary as well, the solitary place of being with God. Circling around and around and around, it takes time to get to the center. And so it is a place of centering for me. And once I get to the center, I get filled up, but I also get emptied out of all of the stress and the trauma and the hard things. And I get filled up with thoughts of God and the Holy Spirit. And so then I start the journey again to make my way out. And as I walk that path in reverse, if you've ever done that, you walk it slowly. Sometimes you're anxious to get to the end and other times not so much. But as you make your way back, you get an appreciation of the grace for the journey. And that's the thing that we need tonight. And we need all the time as we walk this journey of justice and do this justice work, is we have to remember that grace, as difficult as this is. And so we continue our journey, we continue that path. And as I think about that labyrinth, which is my centering place, one of my favorite centering places, my heart just fills up and my heart gets mended. You know, as I kind of gave you a sense of what my day was like and the heartache of it, my heart gets mended as I think about that labyrinth and I think about the path towards the center and then coming back out of the center. Let us pray. Oh God, all people are your beloved, all people, across races, across nationalities, across religions. No matter the ways we are distinctive from each other, we are also manifestations of your image. We're bound together, oh God, in a network of mutuality. You call us, each of us, into your unending work of justice, of peace, of love. Let us know your presence, oh God. Let us know your presence among us right now in this gathering as we do this work, and remain with us when we depart, as we go out into the world to return to our work. Let us always delight in our diversity, and let us always delight in the mosaic of your great beauty. Strengthen us with your love, transform our fatigue and our hopelessness, transform it. And may we come to see that the end that we seek is a society that is at peace with itself, a society that can live with its own conscience. The timing for something like this may feel far off to us, oh God, but the end of the road is in sight. Let us trust in your holy presence. Let us trust that you will lead us there. And when we ask, as we always do, how long? How long? We can say, not long, because you are our God. And in you, we take the great refuge in the shadow of your wings. Amen.
Amen, Leah. May we all remember these words tonight as we continue our program. I wanted to share quickly just a little bit about the agenda, things that are coming up. After the next, Reverend Pete Rowlett is going to talk about a little bit of the history of Holston Conference and the United Methodist Church. I know that's something we think we may be familiar with, but one thing that we have certainly come to understand is that until we really know all the history, it's hard to move forward. It's impossible. So he's going to share some history with us next. After that, we have three people who are going to share their stories. Ivy Miles Slater and Reverend Brenda Carroll, and then Reverend Sharon Bowers are going to tell their stories, which is another way we have discovered and learned that it's a very powerful way to understand, is to hear somebody share their own personal story. And after that, we're going to see a video. It's a little long, it's 19 minutes, but it really is very good. We've decided it's worth showing it tonight. It's from the General Commission on Religion and Race, and Stephanie will tell us. I hope Stephanie's back on. Is she? I hope so. If not, we'll figure it out. Okay, good. Thank you, Stephanie. She's going to introduce this video, and then we're going to view it. And then after that, Donna's going to break us into breakout rooms, and we have some discussion questions, a brief discussion. And after that, Jean Gallion is going to talk about, we have a wonderful program planned next Tuesday. And she's going to talk a little bit about that, what it involves, and who's coming to talk to us. And then at the end, Sharon Bowers will let us have a little bit of time for question and answers. And then Reverend Pat Clendenin is going to close us with worship. So that's what we've got ahead. It may sound like a lot, but it's all good, and we hope you'll stay. And we do promise to be finished maybe even before 9 o'clock, but certainly we will not go past 9 o'clock. And I did want to mention too, when we're talking in conversations, everybody I think knows these things, but I thought I would just mention them again, the guidelines for engaging in difficult but respectful conversations, so that we can remember tonight that when someone's talking, that we listen respectfully without interrupting, that we listen actively and with an ear to understanding others' views, which is sometimes hard to do. We criticize ideas, not individuals. We commit to learning, not debating. We avoid blame, speculation, and inflammatory language. We allow everyone the chance to speak, and we always exhibit compassion and grace. And there they are. Thank you, Donna. So if we'll all just remember those as we go through everything, basically, those are good for everything. And then Reverend Pete, you want to share the history with us now?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We, in planning this, decided that early on we ought to include some review of Methodism's record of encountering racism. So we want that to help us prepare for a new day of racial equality in our denomination. We have to admit that even though in many situations our church has been faithful in opposing racial discrimination and injustice, that hasn't always been the case. So we want to review some of that, and as we do, we will sense that this encounter with racism has been a key factor in the forming of various branches of Methodism that have developed at different times in our history. So first of all, I want to say a little bit about the denomination, and then come back and focus on Holston Conference specifically to see how we fit in the larger picture. At the beginning of the Methodist movement in England, John Wesley encountered racism in its most brutal form, the slave trade. And he was appalled that members of one race believed that they had the right to buy and sell other human beings of a different race. So in 1774, Wesley wrote that slavery was cruel and inhumane, and that merely tolerating the existence of a system of enslavement was an accommodation with evil. Now, the official beginning of the Methodist Episcopal Church in America was at the Christmas conference in Baltimore in 1784. Following the spirit of Wesley, the American church leaders in 1785 adopted the rule that any member who buys and sells slaves is, quote, immediately to be expelled from membership unless they buy them for the purpose of setting them free. From the earliest days, there were many African Americans who were Methodists. However, because of the discrimination that they experienced in the white-dominated church, some preferred to establish their own denominations. The African Methodist Episcopal Church was founded in 1816, and later Black Methodists created the AME Zion Church and the Christian ME Church. Tragically, by the 1800s, the church began to allow its previous anti-slavery fervor to fade and be replaced, in many cases, by the acceptance of and even support of slavery. The division on this issue of slavery was so serious that in 1844, it actually split the church. As a result, the ME Church South was formed and became Methodism in the southern states until after the Civil War. At the end of the war, it's interesting what developed. For many years, there were two branches of Methodism that lived side by side in the South until 1939. What happened in 1939? These two branches of Methodism joined with the Methodist Protestant Church to unite as a single denomination simply called the Methodist Church. The price of unification, however, was to give in to the insistence by the Southern branch that a racially segregated unit called the Central Jurisdiction would be created, to which Black churches and clergy would be assigned. It was almost 30 years later, 1968, that the United Methodist Church was formed through the merger of the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren Church. Now, in this instance, the opposite happened. The price of merger that was required by the historically abolitionist EUB denomination was that the racially segregated Central Jurisdiction be dismantled. Now, how does Holston fit into this? Well, Holston Conference was founded in 1824. In 1844, when the church split, unfortunately, Holston voted to go with the ME Church South, even though a significant number of the members did not, or actually opposed the decision. Now, from that time on, Holston increasingly reflected the Southern slave-owning patriarchy and culture. There were key leaders in the church who led the conference in that direction, so that many of the clergy became supporters of secession and gave their loyalty to the Confederacy. And I was so impressed in reading that I guess almost shocked to know this was part of our history. One prominent figure in Holston history even attempted to use scripture as well as common racist arguments to justify slavery when he wrote that slaves, quote, received the benefits of Christianity and civilization through their enslavement. Now, the period prior to and during the Civil War was a time of great conflict in Holston Methodism. And one of the main reasons was that Holston Conference is located in an area that contained large numbers of both those loyal to the Union and those who supported the Confederacy. So this conflict was especially divisive. Immediately after the Civil War, the ME Church began to establish congregations in the South, whereas by the plan of separation in 1844, they had left, they began to come back. First Church Knoxville, for example, was organized in 1866 for persons who had been loyal to the Union and did not feel welcome in the ME Church South. And it's interesting, in Holston, many communities, there are churches that have roots in both branches. but there have been some mergers as a result. For example, First Centenary in Chattanooga and First Broad Street in Kingsport represent that type of merger, former ME, former ME South. Now, this is a very interesting part of our history and one that I lived through as a pastor. In 1968, when the central jurisdiction was eliminated, Holston moved immediately to establish Black leadership at the highest level. That was a unique opportunity because that was the year that we were made an Episcopal area. For that, we had been sharing a bishop with Memphis and Tennessee conferences. But our delegation used that opportunity to request that the first Black bishop to serve in the Southeastern jurisdiction after merger, L. Scott Allen, be assigned to Holston. 28 years later, Holston welcomed a second Black bishop, James Edward Swanson, who served an 8-year term ending in 2012. During the half century between the formation of the United Methodist Church and now, Holston has been served by Black bishops for 16 years, approximately 1/3 of the time. And we're also, make sure I get this in, fortunate that several clergy persons from the former Black East Tennessee Annual Conference were brought into Holston and assumed key positions. Raymond White was the first to be on the cabinet, eventually serving as the superintendent of 3 different districts. I was in the Johnson City district when he became our district superintendent. And I realized several years later, when I had the opportunity to serve as a district superintendent, that to a very great degree, I was modeling my ministry after what I had learned from Raymond White, because he was terrific district superintendent. Walter Willis was the first in a cross-racial appointment at Kern Church in Oak Ridge, and then later was called upon to be a district superintendent in Maryville and Oak Ridge. And recently, I'm sure some of you saw in the Call an article about Walter that was a wonderful tribute to this gifted man who has contributed so much to Holston and to the general church. And then Paul Marchbanks was in this group, the original group that came in and began to provide leadership. And he began his career as a superintendent of the Morristown district, later the Tazewell district. And I was able to serve on the cabinet with Paul and observed his great commitment to the churches and ministers over whom he had supervision. And then subsequently, we've had as district superintendents, Dan Taylor, Adam McKee, Sandra Johnson, Angela Hardy Cross. Did I miss anybody? I think that's it. So that more than half of our districts have now had the privilege, the benefit of being served by Black district superintendents. And I want to also mention that over the years, since 1968, Black clergy and lay members have regularly been elected to represent Holston at the general and jurisdictional conferences. And we have the bragging rights to the fact that our group that's sponsoring this program tonight has in the Holston's 2020, I guess we call it 2021, General Conference delegation, 2 Black women, Sharon Bowers, clergy, Donna Mosby, a layperson. And recently, Donna has just been elected president of the Holston Conference United Methodist Women. And I will yield my time.
Thank you so much, Pete. So as you can see, we have some good moments in our history, but we've got a long way to go. But thank you so much for sharing that. And Ivy, are you going to go first to share, I think? Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am, I am. At first, I would like to say thank you to Reverend Doyle for allowing us to do this program. You are a lovely lady, and I hope that you know that we really have tried to bring you the best of the best. This evening, I just want to share I have been United Methodist since the time I was conceived in my mother's womb. And I just want to do my own family history and bring you to where I am today. Um, my relatives got off of a slave ship in Annapolis, Maryland as cargo. And we could actually call the State House and they will pull up our manifest. And it is, I, I'm American. I am proud to be an American, and we've been United Methodist forever. The owner of my family's plantation was Methodist, and he went to a camp meeting held by Bishop Coke and Bishop Asbury, who were circuit riders, preaching and spreading the word. Following the meeting, he went home and freed his slaves. Therefore, my family actually has been free before the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. My grandfather, several generations ago, was given a parcel of land for the slaves to worship and to be a church, a Methodist church. The church still stands, has a wonderful cemetery full of history, and I was actually christened in that church. My roots are American and Methodist. My parents still own a home not far walking distance to this church, and my mom, who is 93 years old, has always been very politically active. My mom in the 60s, mid 60s, was working on voter registration. And one night, my sister, who's about 7 years older than me, who should be here with us, and myself and my mom, we were coming home from shopping. And when we returned home, we had just missed a cross being burnt in our yard. My dad was standing there waiting for us, and he literally wrapped me in his arms, and he put one hand over my face so I really couldn't see the last embers of the cross, and he walked us into our home safely. And the only thing I can tell you is I am American. We moved without the sale of the house that still stands. We moved to a town, Columbia, Maryland. Columbia was a new planned and still is a wonderful city between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland. It still revolves around racial equality. Everyone lives together. My uncle and aunt lived in Columbia. And Pastor Bowers was talking earlier about G Corps. My uncle was actually one of the first, because G Corps was started in '68, around that time. And my uncle really was one of the first pastors. And for the General Commission on Religion and Race, and he's best friends with Bishop Woody White. And I have some of the people that I met, literally, people really did bring people home for Sunday dinners. Just, I feel like I have really had an incredibly incredible life as a United Methodist, and especially as a Black United Methodist. Reverend Bishop White, I'm sorry, because that's what I knew him as first, I'm sorry. Bishop White founded Black Methodist for Church Renewal, and my dear mother is a lifetime member. I feel very blessed to be able to share all of this. Anyway, I went to college in South Carolina at the University of South Carolina, and I probably I could have had a nervous breakdown because of the shift in my universe. One of the things that astounded me was the Confederate flag that was flying over top of the South Carolina State House in the center of Columbia, South Carolina. It was absolutely unbelievable. I met a nice guy, and he went to law school. I married a lawyer. He's a black male, and at least once every 6 months or so, someone asks me, "Are you married to a black man?" Mainly because he's an attorney. And "Are you sure your husband's a lawyer?" And my favorite one is, "My husband's name is John." I thought that John was married to a white woman. Now remember, this is 2020 and America. I arrived in Knoxville over 20 years ago, and my husband is an attorney at TVA. He was strongly recruited because the organization needed some ethnicity. I mention this because regularly people just assume he's a janitor. Most of the people on this call are familiar with Church Street United Methodist Church. And I actually go to Church Street, and I don't believe that I am there by accident. Many people remember Claire Garland. I went to a funeral, gosh, maybe the second or third year John and I arrived in Knoxville. She was coming home from Alabama or somewhere out of town, and she was tired, and she hit a bridge abutment and lost her life. It was the largest funeral. I have never seen Church Street packed like it was. Claire was just a special person. And then we have another infamous member, Phyllis Strange. I went to her daughter's wedding. And I didn't get to really become a member or go to church there until 15 years later. So I've been to a funeral and a wedding, but here I am. And the reason that I go there is because one of the reasons that I belong to this group is because when we have a wonderful soup kitchen, and 4 years ago, I usually stopped at McDonald's and got a sweet tea and sometimes something to eat because I didn't want to eat. I went to the soup kitchen every week to try to help people find sustainable income or sustainable jobs. And I mean, our church members fix a phenomenal meal. It's a beautiful thing. So I dressed the table, put a tablecloth on it, sat down, and I sat there. But before I could even get to church that day, I was in line at McDonald's, and the McDonald's is right in the middle of the University of Tennessee campus. And there was a young man behind me, and
Hey, Ivy.
uh,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I'm thinking our time is getting a little short.
okay.
I know, if you don't mind, I don't want to cut your story short.
You go ahead. I'm good.
No,
I think everybody's got the idea. That's how I got to I'm good.
are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's
Okay,
fine.
thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. Sharon, are you going to go next?
I think I'm supposed to go next. And Pat, stop me too, because I'm old and my story's long. I can't help it because it goes every year that you live. My first 22 years of life were spent in the bounds of the Clinch Mountain District, and that's why I thought that I might be interested in sharing some of my story tonight. I've not shared this with the group yet, but y'all are home folks, and I wanted to do that. My church was Elk Garden, and I clearly remember being told as a child and having to do a little bit of history stuff in the 4th grade that the church has a balcony because that's where the slaves sat during worship. So I kind of grew up knowing some of that history, but it, you know, as a child, it doesn't quite register like it does now. My elementary school was Elk Garden, the now home of the wonderful Outreach Center. And my high school was Lebanon High School. My college was Emory and Henry. So I am a child of that geographic area for sure and was formed there. My high school became integrated about halfway through my time there. It was kind of a big deal in Lebanon, in the newspapers, and I heard adults talking about it. From my mother, I had a role model of the most gracious hospitality. So whoever passed the road and stopped at our house was invited to come on the porch and visit. And we spent a lot of time on that porch visiting. I learned hospitality from her. And from my pastors, one of whom is on this Zoom meeting, and from Sunday school teachers, I had learned a lot about Jesus. I had grown to love Jesus and his ways of embracing people, and I believed in him. And I believed I should act like he did. So I knew my role in that much anticipated day and year of integration was to be gracious, welcoming, and kind. And I did my best to live that out. But Russell County had few Black residents. Likewise, Emory and Henry had very few students of color. And my seminary, even though it was located in the middle of Atlanta, which was, I would stand at the drugstore where I worked and just look out on the world and think, my gosh, this is mind-blowing for a Russell County girl. And yet my seminary was predominantly white, very few students of color. So my world was very white for most of that time. I did have the privilege of being ordained by Bishop Allen that Pete talked about. But I did not consider myself to be prejudiced. And then my husband and I decided to adopt children. And it was mind-blowing to go through the interviews with DHS, where you had to go through every physical characteristic, color of eyes, color of hair, every physical characteristic imaginable to check if you would accept a child with that characteristic. And I was brokenhearted. I went home and sobbed. And the hardest part was that the two categories, there are only two categories for adoption, and one was healthy white infant and one was hard to place. So you were either healthy white infant or hard to place. And in this process, we discovered that clergy friends of ours were fostering for Holston Home, and they had an infant girl who was biracial in their home. She was brand new to the world. And we knew she would be hard to place. And we checked with Holston Home, and there were no families waiting who were willing to have a biracial child. And so we began to work with that process and to pursue it within ourselves, within Larry and I talking and praying and discerning, could we do this? Should we do this? Is this the thing for us? And are we the people for her? And while we decided we were, you know, people are very eager to tell you all the roadblocks and all the reasons you shouldn't do this and all the reasons that'll be bad for the child down the road. Ultimately, we made the decision that we would welcome her into our home because we had visited our friends. And once I ever looked in the eyes of that little girl, I knew I wanted her to be mine. But I went through this discovery, and I'll have to be perfectly honest with you. I found out what implicit bias is because I had this vision, and those of you who've been to Elk Garden School know those steps that come down. They're long steps, and I had always envisioned, had this vision in my head of my little girl coming down those steps into my arms after school, even though I knew I wouldn't live there. That's the vision, which we all have before we ever have children. And I couldn't get that vision of my daughter being a little black girl coming down to fit and be okay. And so I had to go to work. I found out there were things that I had absorbed from my culture that were in my heart that I didn't know about, didn't know they were there. And so I was mortified with myself, and I began a work, and that was 42 years ago this fall. And I'm still working. I have not found a moment where there isn't more work to do. And raising two, we had later adopted another child, and raising two biracial children, I had a front seat for viewing racism, both individual and systemic. There's a quote by James Baldwin that says, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time." And I discovered that as a parent of these two children, I had occasion for a lot of rage, a lot of growth. But raising these children has been a privilege. It seemed that all my friends had blonde children, and I grew accustomed to their children being called beautiful and mine being called cute. And I began to learn about the way we value skin and body as white people and what we actually have come to believe about that, all the while I'm growing to the point that, to me, Black children are beautiful and white children are cute. It didn't take me long to get there. I'm indebted to the people who have come along with me on my journey to help me grow, to point things out to me, to give me the opportunity to see who I am and who I can become. I'm indebted to people in the 90s in the Knoxville area. A decade in Blount County, I had a group there that met and worked on racism. Chattanooga, what a blessing. That's a time where I was really free to see the world, the diversity of the world. The world is not as white in Chattanooga as it is in all the other places in Holston Conference that I've lived. And what a blessing to have 3 precious years and to have colleagues who were willing to push me and give me insight. There was a precious clergyman that I had to convince to trust me because he was Black and I was white, and that what a journey that is, to know that he has every reason not to trust me, and I desire badly to be trusted. So I'm grateful for those years, maybe more than any others. And then when coming to Knoxville, back to the mostly white world, I was blessed to be able to become a part of this group. I had been to some special events and knew it existed. And so I was thankfully invited to be a part of it and to have a group of people to journey with. As part of this group, I've read and I've relearned history. I hope we all get an opportunity to know that the history we learned in school was not history, and that there are real history books that we can read and learn and know the history of the United States and the history of the South and the history of the area we live in, which is never told to us when we're in school. So that's my growing edge today.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sharon, do you want to, I know we've gone over just a little bit. Do you want to talk, or are you going to wait?
Well, I guess I'll just have to wait.
You can, you can go.
No, I'm fine. I can wait. I was really, the only thing that I was going to say is just that things are not as good as they could be and should be for the Black church in the Holston Conference. And then I was just going to share a little bit from that perspective. So I will share that next time, if you don't mind, if we have a few moments next week, and just share from that perspective so that we can keep on our time.
You promise?
I promise.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon, for being flexible. I just hate to cut people off, but I know we're kind of on a clock here, so thank you. Stephanie, are you ready to show the video?
Yes, I am. Let's hope I don't go away. I want to say to the persons, I know Ivy and Miss Brenda did the stories. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Stories are very important to this work. They're powerful and inspiring, and being biracial too. Wow. I admire you, Reverend Brenda. Next, we're now going to watch a video from GCOR, General Commission on Race and Religion, that Sharon had mentioned earlier, called Meaningful Conversations About Race. This particular video that we're going to watch in just a moment was done on February 21st, 2017, with Dr. David Anderson Hooker. As part of this series, Vital Conversations 1, Realities of Race and Racism. It's about 19 minutes long, and as Pat mentioned, after the video, we will break into chat rooms and have a little conversation.
Hello, and welcome to the General Commission on Religion and Race's Vital Conversations series. In this series, we are featuring thought leaders, pastors, theologians, activists, authors, and scholars who are sharing their stories, their insights, and their expertise in support of GCOR's mission to build the capacity of the United Methodist Church to be contextually relevant and to reach more people, younger people, and more diverse people. We are delighted that you're joining in on the Vital Conversations movement, dealing with issues related to faith, culture, and fighting oppression in the church and world today. I'm pleased to introduce Reverend David Anderson Hooker's Vital Conversation talk on the elements that hinder and help fruitful dialogue on issues of race. Reverend Hooker is a member of the staff of Just Peace Center for Mediation and Conflict Transformation, whose mission is to prepare and assist United Methodists to engage conflict constructively and in ways that strive for justice, reconciliation, resource preservation, and restoration of community in the church and world. For more than 30 years, Reverend Hooker has been a mediator, facilitator, and community organizer. He has worked in the United States, Europe, Africa, and Latin America on issues of environmental justice, post-riot reconciliation, community development, democratization, and multi-party conflict resolution. Reverend Hooker is ordained in the United Church of Christ. We invite you to stay connected with GCOR by following us on Facebook and Twitter, and by visiting our website to learn more about our work and to find resources to assist you in having your very own vital conversations. And now, it is my very distinct pleasure to present to you Reverend David Anderson Hooker.
Hello, I'm David Anderson Hooker. Talking about race and racial issues is uncomfortable for many people because many people believe that any such conversations seem unnecessary at best or problematic, or worse, seem harmful and divisive. Usually, those objections are bolstered by the following three arguments. First, there's only one race, and that's the human race. So this is really a conversation about nothing, some say. They believe that we'd all be better off ignorant individuals. To people who operate from this viewpoint, they believe that the lived situation, at least in the United States, has improved to the point that talking about race is no longer necessary. Third, these conversations are usually so divisive that they're not worth the time or the energy. It just makes people madder. So, some people say it doesn't resolve anything. Let me address these 3 points. Of course, there's only one race, the human race. I totally agree. The way we have historically divided ourselves into races is a fiction. Substantial scientific agreement proves that there is no biological or physiological support for the construct of race. Race is a myth, a fairy tale. It's about as accurate as the notion that Christopher Columbus discovered America. But in the same way that we name cities and colleges after Columbus, and we have a national holiday that supports the myth of Columbus discovering a land where people had already lived, so too we've built structures, dedicated institutions, and assigned access to privileges and resources and esteem, and demeaned, even destroyed whole groups of people based on the myth of race and racial superiority and inferiority. So while race started off as a lie and a myth, created solely to establish a hierarchy of privilege and access, we have now lived with it as though it were a reality. Humanity has made race real for so long that we still use the construct to determine the quality of relationships, devise the division of resources, and design systems and structures, including the church, that shape the lived experience of people on a day-to-day basis. We've used the myth to shape our world, and so we can't just walk away as though not talking about it will undo all the mischief that it's created. We have to talk about it. About the notion that we're post-racial, we have a half-black president. We have influential, successful people of every color, black, brown, golden, red, multiracial, in every industry, science, politics, business, religion, arts, and entertainment. Surely, race cannot possibly still be a factor in the lived experience, right? Yeah. There are all around the world people of every racialized category whom we can call success stories. Yet, racialized categories significantly and effectively predict the outcome in health, education, criminal justice, wealth, and so many other dimensions of life. Race is a fiction, but racism is very real right now. When I say racism is real, many of you just got uncomfortable and asked yourselves, did he just call me a racist? I need you to relax. Breathe deeply. Lean back into the conversation. Racism doesn't have to be conscious and personal. The problem, even the paradox of racism, is that people who are not consciously aware of it or intentionally supporting it can still sustain it and benefit from it. And people who are oppressed by it often act in ways that support and sustain the racism that they oppose. So we're certainly not beyond it. We need to talk about it. But how? Because yes, the conversations can become strident and uncomfortable. Some of you have tried to have these conversations. If the conversation goes well, it often improves relationships, even if people's lived experiences do not change substantially. And when the conversation goes badly, people are left feeling attacked, not heard, vulnerable, disregarded, disrespected, and ultimately leaving with an increased skepticism, cynicism, or resignation about our ability to do anything about what really is. I've been a civil rights lawyer, a mediator, a psychologist, a preacher, a community organizer, a professor, and a leadership development specialist. I've participated in community engagement, civil rights litigation. I've advocated for reparations, participated in and led multiple forms of cross-racial dialogue, prejudice reduction training, and so many other approaches. All of these were attempts to better understand and then to shift the issues of division, separation, and inequity that exist as the norm in most of our communities. Complete failure or failure to substantially change the dynamics is no reason to stop working at it. So I have a few insights that I think will be helpful for those of you who accept the invitation to participate in these difficult conversations. First, don't get bogged down trying to prove or disprove the existence of racism. Instead, tell stories and listen. The primary reason for having the conversations is usually not to resolve the current episode of conflict that is causing problems, but rather to look for what noted peace builder John Paul Lederach would call the epicenter, the source of the current conflict. The most difficult conversations, and especially those that are shaped by issues of race, are rarely about what we call facts or the meaning of facts. Conversations are not advanced by discussions about fact. A fact is something that aligns with our understanding of what is true and the way that the world works. The ways that something comes to be true is based on the stories that are told to us and the stories that we tell to ourselves and to others. And many of those stories become invisible because they're embedded in structures and systems. Imagine that our lives are like this blank screen. Neuroscientists tell us that at every given moment of our lives, there are approximately 11 million points of data that we could pay attention to. However, the most conscious person can barely attend to 75 data points simultaneously. Imagine that your life is like that of a baby riding in the back seat of a car. You hear sounds, see different colors and shapes, but there's no meaning attached to them yet. So what you're seeing is not trees or cars or traffic lights. And what you're hearing is not the wind or tires or conversations. These stimuli will only become objects of significance when the baby hears stories from the family and others to help socialize them and give meaning to each observation and stimulation. And usually, the meanings we attach to objects or categories of objects include the emotions, the nature of the relationship with the thing, and the expectations that we have for how the thing will act or perform in the future. To start difficult conversations, we have to assume that people are experts in their day-to-day lived experience, and also assume that the stories we tell about our day-to-day experience usually go unexamined. There's always more than one story. For example, at some point, someone has to teach a child the difference between flowers and weeds. To a child, dandelion flowers are pretty, and when they're fully ripe, they're fun to blow or run with and watch the seeds scatter. As you grow older, Even if you learn other stories that say dandelions have medicinal benefits and the leaves are good for food, and you remember how fun and attractive they are, if you own a home with a garden, the main thing you know is that dandelions can take over and they will ruin your lawn. We simply rely on our historical experiences and what others have told us to make judgments about the thing. All dandelions look alike. So there's a lot of information about dandelions, but the dominant story you tell will depend on whether you're a suburban gardener, an herbalist, or a rural farmer. And the other stories about this plant don't always sound true to you. The same ways that we assign categories to animals and plants, we assign categories of meaning to people. Race is a category used to assign meaning to people. As I've said, there's no biological support for the construct of race. Race's primary value is as an idea, as the pillar for maintaining the hierarchical access to statuses and privileges that are often referred to as racism, white privilege, or some other oppression. Consciously or unconsciously, because of the stories that have been passed to us and the systems that have been set up to reinforce the stories, there are beliefs that we have about what are appropriate relationships, statuses, emotions, and thoughts to have. Our history books, television shows, newscasts, and art and music all tell stories about different groups of people and what we should expect from them. We're told that there are certain physical characteristics that suggest a person is dangerous or trustworthy. Remember, the blank screen is your life, and there are 11 million data points at every given moment. For instance, a traditional story that was once told was that there's this concept of race. Everyone belongs to one racial category or another. Races are different. One variation of the story was that one race is better than others. Because races are different, they shouldn't mix. Even the Bible tells us we shouldn't mix seeds of different kinds. Based on that story, a dominant group has built systems and structures, like laws in schools, to make sure everyone lives according to the story. And historically, the story is told repeatedly and enforced by violence and social pressure to make sure everyone acts accordingly. Another version of the story is that there is this thing called race. People are different, but no one race is better than any other. By being together, races can take advantage of the best that everyone has to give. Each of these stories creates a cylinder that structures the ways that meaning is made, which means that two people can have the same observation, and based on the stories they have adopted, one might see innocent play or even progress, while another sees looming danger or even a violation of God's order. Here are a few points to consider. First point, systems are not neutral. As human beings, we make meaning. We categorize objects into groups. We attach emotion, and then we pass our meaning on to one another in stories, and we build structures and systems to support and reinforce the stories we want to tell. So although Kentucky bluegrass is also an invasive plant species and it has no medicinal or nutritional value, we nevertheless sell bluegrass seed for growing in our lawns, but we offer only weed killer for dandelions, because that's just our story. Second point, safety is overrated. When we agree to participate in potentially difficult conversations, we want to be assured that there will be safe space. Unfortunately, what safe space has come to mean is that the dialogue processes are shaped in ways that limit passionate expression. They take emotions out and try not to become polarized. What this often means in practice is that we only talk to people who share our experience. Stories without emotions are like listening to an opera without the orchestra. The story without the emotion and historical connection is incomplete, and it lacks context. Space for transformative dialogue requires that we invite difference, allow for passionate expression of divergent experience, and honor all of what makes our communities possible. Finally, a story. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, and raised in a small neighborhood known as North Avondale. North Avondale was a very unique community. My high school, Walnut Hills, a magnet public school for college prep. It was very mixed in terms of race, ethnicity, class, and religion. My classmates, black, white, Asian, Latino, very rich, very poor. Our parents were professional, working class, tradesmen, entrepreneurs, and everything in between. As kids, we played together, we partied together, we slept in each other's houses, we dated across lines of race and class. And I don't know whether any of us knew that the world outside was any different. But as I got older, I realized that my little corner of Cincinnati was unlike any place I've been or lived in since. For that matter, my experience was not even like that of most children in Cincinnati. And ever since I've been away from Cincinnati and my little bubble, I have looked for ways to recreate the experiences of ease, intimacy, community that I had as a child. In our little corner of God's world, race and ethnicity were interesting and informative, but not predictive of our school success or the quality of our relationships. I wonder if you would be courageous enough to host and engage in conversations that explore how to make community possible in your little corner of God's world. If each of us does our part where we live, eventually we might arrive at a place where it's indeed true that valleys will be lifted, mountains will be lowered, rough places will be made smooth, and we might all experience the glory of God's beloved community together. That could be your story.
Okay, so Donna, you want to go ahead? We're going to stay within our time allotment because we promised. So I thought Donna's going to break us into breakout rooms. We're just going to have about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back maybe for a little Q&A, and Jean Gallion has a little brief something, and we're going to close with a little worship service, so we're just going to have to kind of go quickly. So Donna, you want to just break us up?
Okay, I am sending you all on your way. I'm going to put the moderators in the room first, so they will be there waiting for you all when you get there.
Thank you.
Do you think by chance we're in our breakout room?
I don't think.
Oh, okay. There were only a few of us left. I thought we might have already been there.
Oh, that's a
Seriously.
possibility though.
No, it should ask you to join that breakout room because
Yeah.
we got breakout rooms during our class session.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She still must be doing, just figuring it out here.
Well, in the meantime, I'll do my story. No, let me stop.
We would love to
Yes!
hear it.
Tell a story.
I want to know how old you are.
Oh, Sharon, I've moved you to room 6. You must be logged in 2 places still.
No, I don't think so.
Are you on a Galaxy? Because
No, that's Annette Warren, I believe.
that's weird because it shows that you're in room 6.
No, I'm out here with all the outsiders.
All right, something's not working, but let me finish sending everybody
We
and
don't
we'll
fit
figure it
in,
out.
no.
We're all out here.
We might be a team. Marie, are you a coach? Are you one of the facilitators?
I am, but I'm seeing everybody on screen.
Oh, okay. I didn't look to see if everybody was on there.
I don't think I'm anywhere else.
No, everybody's still here.
So
That's a
who's
good.
yeah, I already.
Wonder if
Okay.
Donna knows this is not working.
Yeah, something's not working, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. A lot of people have gone to rooms.
Oh,
If we need for this to be a room, we'll just make it a room because we're running out of time. We'll just be a room. Pat, you and I are
We're
still here.
flexible.
I thought we had a room.
Yeah, maybe this is our room.
But Brenda had a room too. And Marie has it.
for enough
But we
people.
can't just make this a room because all of those other people are off in nowhere by themselves wondering what's going on.
I know.
That is
I mean-
true.
Well, I don't know that there's so many people off by themselves.
Well, she said she had been putting people in rooms.
I think she was putting the facilitators in rooms.
Well, okay.
All the facilitators are.
Mm. Okay, can you hear me? And everybody in my room can unmute themselves.
Hold on, Pat.
Oh, okay.
Something's going on with the room assignments. I'm got to get you into your room.
Oh, okay.
Hold on, Lloyd. I'll get you in a room here in just a second.
No, my problem is my connection's real unstable.
Okay.
I'm
You're the last one I need to place, though,
just
so.
gonna try to engage with you as much as I can, but I'm very unstable.
Huh. I think you may have to click something to join that room, Lloyd, because it says that I've sent you there, but you've not joined. Can you see? Where
I
that
was in there. I was in there at one point. Here, let me go to the breakout room here. Okay. But once again, I'm not going to be able to hear most of it.
There we go. Everyone is in the breakout room.
Okay, we've only got, gosh, we've only got about 15 minutes. I think if it's okay with everybody, because I know it's hard to be on Zoom for 2 hours, let's just maybe not do the Q&A. I hate to do that, but I think at this point we don't have time. I hope you'll come back next week and we'll try to do that. But because I want Jean Gallion to have a little bit of time to talk about next week. And then I want Pat Clendenin is going to close us with something that I really think will be a good way to end our evening. So if it's okay, let's just do that. Jean, if you don't mind, go ahead, and then we'll let Pat close us out with just a very brief worship service. And thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And Jean's going to tell you, and I hope we'll see each one of you back here next week. You'll get some emails about that. Jean?
Yes, I'm thrilled to meet so many of you on Zoom and hope to see you again. You already know that the session is next Tuesday night, same time, 7 p.m. If you can come by 6:45 or 6:50, it would really help us get started and have our full time. one thing that we're going to be doing next week is looking at another video, and it's narrated by the best-selling author, Dr. Robin DiAngelo, and it's called Deconstructing White Privilege. And in the video, she puts a very clear focus on some of the misconceptions that we white people have. And she explains how over the centuries, our American culture has developed and evolved in such a way that we no longer are even aware of these cultural systems that have forever placed and continue to place African Americans at a disadvantage in literally every arena of living. This presentation is not about blaming. It is about learning. We're all a group of committed Christians here trying to learn and keep on moving toward perfection. So the goal is to learn, to build relationships, follow Jesus' commandments, and ultimately just to live fully and together in diversity. And so what the presentation is about is a better understanding of our American history, in which the color of one's skin has always crucially mattered. Pat is going to email you an exercise or checklist for you to complete this week and to bring with you for our next gathering next week. And the checklist will bring to your attention aspects of your daily life that you perhaps always assumed was the norm for everyone. 2 wonderful United Methodist ministers will be joining us next week to share their experiences and most of all their wisdom. One is the retired Bishop Ken Carter of the United Methodist Church, who was born and grew up in East Tennessee in Washington County. Many of you may know that already. He is so well loved by everyone who has ever known him. And he has distinguished himself on every level as a pastor, on general United Methodist agencies, as a bishop, and as an author of 5 books. And for several years now, he's been writing a blog called Shifting Margins, which you really might enjoy following. He has a real special concern for prison ministries, for racial justice, and ministry with the poor and the marginalized. Also with us, we will have the Reverend Tony Love, who is currently serving as the assistant to the Bishop of the Baltimore, Washington Conference of the United Methodist Church. He's been doing this since 2017. He has many gifts that he has been sharing with Methodists and with Christians for over 20 years. And that includes his genuine, down-to-earth ability to relate to people. He's noted for his reliance on prayer, for his abilities to encourage and to empower lay and clergy people in their ministries, and as an advocate of revival and renewal in the local churches, as well as his skills, well, I said, in encouraging and empowering others. It's also said that he has a deep understanding of grace and of what hospitality is all about, as well as the practice of spiritual discipline. Reverend Love is a graduate of the University of Maryland and Howard University, and he has had experience in ministry for 28 years. They will be truly exceptional. So Pat, are you up next?
Yes, I am. So let us move into a spirit of worship as we close out our time together tonight. On December 5th, 1955, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. extemporaneously delivered a sermon at Holt Street Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, during the first mass meeting of the Montgomery Improvement Association. These words are excerpted from that sermon. But I want to tell you this evening that it is not enough for us to talk about love. Love is one of the pivotal points of the Christian faith. There is another side called justice, and justice really is love in calculation. Justice is love correcting that which revolts against love. Dr. King has given us a beautiful working definition of justice. He defines justice as love in calculation and love correcting that which revolts against love. Rooted in love, justice is not self-serving and seeks not to crush perpetrators of injustice, but to heal, mend, and restore them through love. Over the next week, until we come back together again next Tuesday evening, let us commit to one another to engage in conversations, sacred conversations, maybe with someone who may have different viewpoints from you, or someone who sees no need for conversation. You have heard the guidelines for sacred conversation, and they've been up in the chat room and will be sent to you by email in the next day or so. And I encourage you to refer to those again as you enter into these conversations. And may our conversations always be love in calculation, never forgetting that love is always at the forefront of justice. Last night, I was on Zoom in a book study and had the opportunity to experience a song which I would like to share with you. Although its focus is on the pandemic, it acknowledges the racism which has been exposed by the pandemic. Its message, God has not given a spirit of fear, so let your love shine. Following the song, we will share in a responsive benediction. The words will be on your screen, and Pat Bellengrath will lead you in your responses, which are printed in bold. Donna, if you will start the video, please.
God has not given a spirit of fear. God has not given a spirit
And let the people of God say amen. Just give me a second. I'm trying to find my Can everyone see that?
No, we're not
You're
seeing a
not
share.
seeing it. Okay, let me come back to the Zoom and then I will.
You want to read it?
Yeah, just read it.
We may have to if I can't get it to come up. Don't know what happened, but okay. Pat, are you unmuted so you can share their part?
Yes.
Okay. As we have celebrated our common faith, so may you worship God where you are every day.
We trust God to stand by us in our struggles and to help us change and grow.
Look beyond the accumulation of things to those relationships with people that give life meaning.
We will dare to share ourselves with all people God loves, that we may more fully understand each other.
Hear the stories your sisters and brothers want to tell, for God may speak to you through them.
We want to feel their pain and their joy, to live in mutual acceptance and peace.
The peace of God go with you and be shared through you.
Amen. So good night, all. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we didn't have time for the questions and some more discussion, but we will next week. So please go in peace. Think about what you've heard here tonight. Try to have a good conversation this week with somebody that maybe thinks a little differently from you. And we'll meet back next Tuesday. You'll get some information this week in an email, and we will certainly be in prayer for one another. Good night.
Try to bring somebody with you, get them to register. Let's get double for our trouble.
Amen.
Yeah,
Good night,
some of
guys.
those who weren't registered who joined us tonight, if you can go ahead and get registered, we'll be sure to be able to send you everything by email then.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And thank you, Donna Hankins, for helping. We could not have done this without her.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night.